Oh, we've got some superstars today, including that man, Windy, going to break down the NBA. Oh, that's not enough for you, pal. Osi Umenyiora. We're stacked today with everybody, and Rookie of the Year came down to the wire. Flagg gets it. We'll break it all down. Yahoo Sports Daily starts right now. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. We are Yahoo Sports Daily, going to be with you for the next 2 hours, getting you caught up on everything you need to know. And we start, Caroline, yeah, we've got some big names. We've got some big guests, but we had big NBA action last night. Absolute shock to so many people in one series. We've got another series that looks different. Let's get straight to it. Denver stayed alive. Detroit got put on the brink. Denver wins big. And look, at the end of the day, they win 25-113, but this game was obviously without some superstars for the Timberwolves. So we see Jokic there, a massive night for him. If anybody in the world could lead their team back from 3-1, is it Jokic for you?
So, yeah, yes, in theory, yes. If you would just ask me that, in a vacuum, my answer would be yes. And then you start to peel back the layers of what Jokic has done in this series, how Rudy Gobert has locked down Nikola Jokic. When you look in the 3 games in which the Nuggets have lost in this series, in game 4, Jokic shot 36% from the field. Game 3, 26% from the field. 8 of 20 in game 2. Granted, Jokic was still putting up 20-plus points and double-digit rebounds. But by Jokic's standards, if he's not hitting a triple-double, it almost feels like disappointing. It almost is like, oof, rough game for him when it's just 27, 14, and 8, which would be a stellar night for literally anybody else. But that's just that is what we have come to expect from Nikola Jokic. So even in a series that hasn't been his best, even in a series where he has looked like he's melted down in the fourth quarter, which is what Nikola Jokic does, I think, better than any other player in the NBA, and that is close out games. Even with all of the uncharacteristically bad basketball that we've seen both from Jokic and from Jamal Murray in those 3 games that they've lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves, I still think the answer is yes. I still think if I had to pick any player in the NBA, just one single player, down 3-1, I need someone to give me some spark, some electricity. I need someone to generate offense. I need someone to move the basketball around. I need someone to play defense for me. Any other player, any player in the NBA, I'm taking Jokic. Even in the games where he hasn't looked like Jokic, I'm still riding with him. And he's the reason why I'm not counting Denver out in this series.
You're right. I agree with everything you just said. I'm not giving any of this credit to Jokic. This is such a depleted version of the Timberwolves at this point. This isn't Jokic beating Minnesota. This is Jokic beating a Minnesota team as currently constructed. It wouldn't be in the playoffs. When you don't have Ant, you don't have DiVincenzo. Like, what do you have for Minnesota that would make you a challenge to anybody? I realize that anytime you've got a playoff win and you're down 3-1, it's going to be significant. But who are you beating and how are you beating them? This is kind of like the way that we looked at in the NFL and had to sit there and say, okay, what's it like to beat the Broncos in an AFC championship game when suddenly they don't have their starting quarterback? When you're talking about 2/5 of your lineup for Minnesota that's not going to be in a game and you win by double digits, I'm just not that impressed. Denver is a team that we came into this playoff, you and I both given a ton of credit to. And I came into this playoff saying, hey, if there's anybody that can muck up what we think we're going to see, if we want that Spurs OKC thing, it's Denver. Well, nothing changes the fact that throughout the course of this series so far, Denver has not lived up to that hype. Denver has not been that version of the Nuggets. Denver has not been who I think they should have been throughout the first round. And you can say, well, Minnesota's always a matchup night for them, and they're a rivalry. Well, if you're going to turn around and be one of the best teams in the NBA, then be one of the best teams in the NBA. I'm not looking for excuses. I'm looking for Denver to come out and play like champions. I'm looking for Denver to play like the version of Denver we thought would be in these playoffs. Now, Jamal Murray put up decent numbers last night, but I wouldn't say Jamal Murray has been Jamal Murray of himself throughout the course of this series. It's all been on Jokic, and now they trail 3-2. I think they're going to win this series. I think they're going to come back. I don't think they're going to come back because of Jokic. I don't think they're going to come back because of anything Denver is doing. I think they're going to come back because they're taking on a Minnesota team that's a shell of themselves. Without their their two main guys in the backcourt. And for Minnesota, I don't know what playoff team they would actually beat in a 7-game series. So, yes, Jokic deserves credit for playing really well. Yes, Jokic is one of the best in the world. I agree with you. If there's any one player I had to take to bring you down from 3-1, it would probably be Jokic. But also, you're doing it against a JV version of Minnesota. I'm not going to do cartwheels for that.
And it's fair. And if Minnesota loses this series, which without Ant, there's a very realistic possibility that happens, especially against a Denver team with one of the best, if not the best players on the planet in Jokic, and one of the best, if not the best dynamic duos in the NBA with Jokic and Jamal Murray. It's not even just a possibility. It's a very realistic probability that Denver's able to fire back and win this series without Anthony Edwards, making the assumption that Anthony Edwards will be out until the end of the series, which of course, TBD, the timeline has been very ambiguous, quote unquote, weeks. Could mean 1 week, it could mean 6 months, we don't know. But if they do, I think if you're a Minnesota fan, you have to be so incredibly frustrated of what could have been, of the possibility of what the fire that this team has found, how they've been imposed their will against this Denver team for the better part of 3 games, how Rudy Gobert has unlocked the secret sauce to do what has seemed like the impossible, and it is hold that man in check. Look, Denver would still be, I think, a deserving team to advance throughout the postseason. Do not get me wrong on that. I'm still going to be wildly intrigued about what Denver can do throughout the course of the postseason. Because would anyone be surprised if it's OKC and Denver in the Western Conference Finals? I wouldn't be. In fact, I'd be very much so down for that. I'd be very excited if that was the case. But if you're a Minnesota fan, you cannot help but think, what if? What could have been? What if Ant didn't hyperextend his knee? How far could this Minnesota team advance throughout the western side of the postseason? Because we've seen this team do it before. We have seen this Minnesota team advance to the Western Conference Finals, even when their backs were against the wall and nobody was picking them out of the first couple of rounds of the postseason.
Yeah, I two things you mentioned here. I don't want to take away from the fact that Denver is going to advance, I think. And, from there, let's see how it looks the rest of the playoffs. But, man, this is a what might have been run for the Timberwolves, certainly. All right, the other side of last night that has everybody just a little bit puckered up is an epic upset in the making, speaking of 3-1, as the Orlando Magic, a team, to be fully transparent and fair, we left for dead in the play-in, is now up 3-1 over the number 1 seed Detroit Pistons in a game that felt like mid-90s basketball and just two teams beating each other up. It was UGLY, ain't got no alibi ugly. And then, after the game, all right, this is what we get. Jalen Duren, after the game, said the following. Too many turnovers, bro. Just been shooting ourselves in the foot. Still think we're the better team, top to bottom. We can't keep digging ourselves in this hole. The Pistons are the 3rd team to win 60 games in the regular season, but trail 3-1 in the opening series. Previous 2 lost the series. Are they making excuses? Are they done? What do you think, Caroline?
I don't think they're making excuses. I don't have any issue with what Jalen Duren said there. I don't think he's making excuses. I think he's diagnosing why they are down 3-1. The Pistons turned the ball over 20 times last night. Cade Cunningham alone had 8 turnovers. We were eviscerating KD when he turned the ball over 8 times previously in that series. So, that's correct. They are turning the ball over and they are shooting themselves in the foot. They are making mistakes that are actively hurting their basketball team. I don't, an excuse would be, pointing the finger to, to the refs. An excuse would be pointing the finger to everything outside of that locker room. But I think Jalen Duren is very much so pointing the finger at each other and saying, we are making far too many mistakes. Now, I do wish Jalen Duren would maybe take a little bit more personal accountability, because if I had to give a blame pie for the reason why the Pistons now find themselves in a 3-1 hole against a team that, frankly, I thought they'd be able to put away in either 4 or 5 games, he's one of them. He is one of the diagnoses for this team, because he had 12 points last night, 8 points the game before, 11 points the game before that, and 8 in game 1. It's not good enough. I mean, Cade Cunningham cannot carry this team single-handedly. He's been doing it for a majority of the regular season, and that's not good enough in the postseason, especially against a team in Orlando that is as sound defensively as they are. I mean, they were able to hold the Pistons to 88 points last night. Orlando, I don't think, is any sort of world beater, but Orlando is a very good defensive team, and Cade Cunningham cannot do it alone. So I do wish Jalen Duren would have at least looked inside a little bit and pointed the finger at himself a little bit more than he did. Overall, I don't have an issue with what he said because he's right. They did turn the ball over far too many times last night. But I do think that Detroit is done. I don't see this Pistons team winning 3 consecutive games. Do I see them winning game 5? Yeah, sure. I could definitely see them winning the next game. But I don't see this Pistons team creating nearly enough offense to not just win 1 game, but to win 3 consecutive games. The only way I could see Detroit potentially scratching and clawing themselves out of this hole is if the Franz Wagner calf injury keeps him sidelined for the rest of the series. I mean, he's so important to the ecosystem of this Orlando team. He is getting an MRI today, so we'll hear a little bit more on exactly the diagnoses of that calf injury. We do know with the sheer number of Achilles injuries that we have seen sideline superstars in the NBA over the past couple of years, they should be approaching this with an abundance of caution. But overall, I think that the Orlando Magic is doing better what the Detroit Pistons have, made their calling card all season long. I think Orlando is out Detroiting Detroit, and for that reason, I expect them to advance.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, the most surprising part about this is to what you just said. Detroit comes into this series with this sort of swagger of we are Detroit. And we've talked how many times this year about a toughness and edge to them. And they're getting out everything by Orlando. It feels like Orlando turned around and said, okay, if that's the way you want to play this game, that's how we'll play this game. As I watched the game last night, I was stunned to see that Detroit really didn't have an answer when Orlando was just flat up in their face. And to the point of turnovers, not all turnovers are unforced. Sometimes it really is just disruptive defense. Detroit didn't really seem to have a game plan of what they were trying to accomplish offensively when things couldn't get in rhythm. And sometimes it feels like this Detroit team trying to drive in and create something commits to a position that they can't figure out. Then they try and dump the ball out, and all of a sudden it creates turnovers. You see Cade Cunningham's turnovers the last 3 games. But at the end of the day, this has been ugly basketball. Detroit's supposed to win ugly basketball games. That's part of the mantra of the Pistons this year and in the fabric of who they are as a franchise. But that's what Orlando's doing better. Ryan Russillo put up a funny tweet last night mentioning the fact that Orlando's wildly talented, but their offense doesn't really have a rhythm, doesn't really have a flow. He says it here. They run almost nothing. They hunt for a matchup, they wait, and if there's nothing else after the first switch, they take terrible shots. Brutal shot selection. Up 3-1 on the number 1 seed. I laughed when I read that because it's a great breakdown by a great basketball mind in Russillo. But I also watched it and thought, yeah, it's absolutely true. And Detroit has no answer for it. Detroit has no answer for being Detroited, which is exactly what the Magic are doing. I didn't think that was going to be possible, but it has been. I still believe that Detroit has the ability to go on a little run here. But to ask them to come down from 3-1, come back, I should say, from 3-1 down, I'd have to buy that they can figure out what they couldn't figure out last night or the night before. It's just there is this point. The Magic take both games at home. It's not that they win them. It's how they've won them. It's the fact that they've been willing to punch Detroit right in the face. They've been willing to say, hey, if you want to slow this thing down and just play playground park basketball that's physical and we're going to be all over the place, if you want to play old man Paul, we will do it all day, every day, and they're winning it. So I've got the Magic figure. I think they only have to win 1 more. I'm going to take Orlando. Are you actually taking Orlando to win this series?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There you go.
I'm not going to say Orlando's going to win in 5, but I think it's a very realistic possibility that Orlando wins this one in 6.
Yeah, I'm stunned. We left Orlando for dead. We're always transparent about it on this show. We thought they were done in the play-in. They made fools out of us, and they're making fools out of Detroit right now. Kudos to you. A hell of a job by Orlando. All right, not so great on the other side as we continue to break down some more of the NBA action. Devin Booker might be time to have some tough conversations about a superstar and his team. We'll do it next.
Another matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. How are these teams going to guard each other?
If you're Denver, you're going to have to find a comfort throwing different coverages at Minnesota and Anthony Edwards. It can't just be one thing. The same goes for Nikola Jokic, where honestly, whatever you do, I'm eventually going to get to a point where you do not feel comfortable with how you are guarding me, no matter who's on me.
Handoff, Thomas busting it through for the end zone. Touchdown! Tavion Thomas and Tucson back in front with 16 seconds left. 1 second, final play of the game. Jerome Johnson look into the end zone. Johnson, far corner, jump ball, knocked into the crowd. Game over. Tucson wins.
Playing basketball with your back to the basket and not able to see the floor in the same way was a whole lot different for LeBron. And so that's why it took a little bit for him to feel comfortable in that back to the basket positioning. He's got more post-ups this postseason than Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, and Alperen Şengün combined. This is a huge story, and what a wrinkle that LeBron James has thrown into this series.
When you guys talk about your relationship and your friendship and your respect, there are some people who think like, well, do they want to kill each other? Do they want to fight each other? Do they want to hurt each other? You have to do that when you fight someone.
Yeah. If you have like females sparring in the gym, like it's really hard to not to go heavy. Like women just like, they cut that, you know, emotional thing off and they just like, it's me or you. And Rhonda has that, I have that.
Not a team in the league should want to trade for Devin Booker. He's going to be 30, has somehow gotten worse, so the league left him behind, and he's on the most expensive contract in the NBA. That's a tweet out there after the Suns get swept and eliminated, and it creates a bit of a conversation because Devin Booker was supposed to be that guy. Like, he wasn't given the richest contract in the NBA because he sucks. He was given the richest contract in the NBA because the Suns thought that they were on the verge of building something special, and now all of a sudden, wha-bam, they're gone. So, Caroline, as we take a look at all of this for Devin, it gets really difficult because once upon a time, remember, OKC traded a 29-year-old Paul George to LA, and we all know what happened from that. It's going to go down as arguably I don't even think arguably, worst trade in NBA history. We'll just say that. And all of a sudden, OKC just stacks the cupboard. Should the Suns follow suit and try to move on from the 29-year-old Devin Booker?
Yeah, I think it's time. Because what's the alternative? Well, at least let's all acknowledge that Devin Booker is not the certified superstar Batman that can carry a team to a championship. That's not what he is anymore, at least. You go back to the 2023 postseason. I mean, Devin Booker was dropping 47 points against Denver in the Western Conference semifinals. Like, Devin Booker was that guy. Devin Booker was the guy that could be the focal point of a team that was in legitimate championship contention. But then Devin Booker, you know, in this previous series this year, has been highly criticized for having wide open shots but kicking the ball out to a teammate. Devin Booker has been highly criticized for not elevating his play to a certain level that you would expect from a guy on a contract as rich as his, especially in the biggest games of the season, especially when your season is on the line. Like this, I mean, the Suns getting swept by the Thunder isn't just about the Thunder to me. Yes, that's a big part of it because the Thunder are the, you know, NBA's greatest world beaters, and it looks like they're on a pretty clear path to winning yet another championship in 2 years. But I also think part of it is about the Suns. That Devin Booker is just not that guy anymore. That Devin Booker is more of a Robin at this point in his career than he is a Batman. So let's all acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge the difficult and harsh truth that I'm sure is hard to acknowledge if you're a Phoenix Suns fan or if you're in the Phoenix Suns organization. So you have two options. One, you either get Devin Booker a Batman. You either double down and you capitalize on this unit that you have currently constructed and you find that certified superstar somewhere so Devin Booker doesn't have to carry the entirety of the load on his back. Where are you going to find that guy? Those guys just don't grow on trees. And the Suns don't have any picks to trade for one of those certified superstars. So I think that's off the table. The only other option is to trade Devin Booker and to acknowledge that the current core that you have in place, Devin Booker included, is not going to win a championship. And Devin Booker is likely your cash cow to get you those picks back and to get you some of those young players back to start building for this next core of the future. Devin Booker is 29 years old. Devin Booker is still an incredibly productive star in this league. He's just not going to be the focal point of a team moving forward. Now, I talked to a Phoenix Suns fan last night, my husband, and I asked him, he's born and raised in Phoenix, loves the Phoenix Suns. I said, how would you feel if the Suns traded Devin Booker? He said, do it. I'm done. I'm ready to move on, and I would rather be bad for the next 5 years than try and run it back with what we currently have. That tells me all I need to know. It's time. It feels like things have gotten stale in Phoenix, Fitzy.
They have. Here's the difficult part for me. We just had the graphic up of the trade that sent 29-year-old Paul George to Oklahoma City. And we started this conversation by saying, looking at what Oklahoma City was able to do in this trade, should the Phoenix Suns try to replicate Oklahoma City and do the same thing? My question is, what about the other side? If I'm going to look at this and say, that's the dumbest trade in NBA history, then I'm asking somebody else to again make the dumbest trade in NBA history. Like, if we learn from one side, do we not also have to learn from the other, right? That's the part of this that just blows my mind. Trading for 29-year-old Paul George is one of the dumbest trades in all of sports history. Trading for 29-year-old Devin Booker in the same way would be one of the dumbest trades. Like, it's just, if I'm doing the math and saying, well, the Suns need to turn around and be OKC, then that means whoever trades for Devin Booker needs to turn around in this equation and be the Clippers. Like, there's no win in it. Devin Booker is not going to turn around and make somebody great. Now, that being said, Devin Booker might make somebody better, but is he going to suddenly result in rings galore? Not likely. But if I'm the Suns and somebody wants to take him, hell yes, I'll take him. Absolutely, because he isn't going to get me where I need to be. This is where we keep talking about the truth serum. I think every team in the West needs to take. You got to look in the mirror. You got to have a tough conversation with yourself about where you are and where you're going. If you're Phoenix, you have absolutely no path right now. None. Zero path that is going to get you past OKC, San Antonio, maybe Denver. So your best case scenario for the next, 3-4 years is that you might be the third, fourth, fifth best team in your own conference. So barring massive injury to somebody else, and that's not a way to do business, saying I hope everybody else gets hurt, you got no shot at a chip. So you got to ask yourself, what's going to make me a championship caliber team? Well, the answer to that certainly is to trade Devin Booker. But if I'm trading Devin Booker, all I want is picks because I got to go through the OKC thing. Teams have to decide. And I remember this so distinctly. When OKC traded everybody, I asked one of the reporters that cover them at the time, I said, what is the cost of relevance? Because when you make trades like this and you get rid of Devin Booker, you have to be willing to be irrelevant until you can rebuild. Now, that's worked out for OKC. They were willing to ship out a bunch of names and say, hey, we're just going to do this all over again. And for several years, nobody gave a damn about OKC. The question in my mind is Phoenix, are the Suns willing to become literally irrelevant in the infrastructure of the NBA for the next several years in an attempt to get a championship? I don't know. So with that being said, we did at least figure out a trade. They went in, producers extraordinaire, figured out a trade that may work, all right? So, and this could tie in a bunch of different things because you got the Suns knocked out. The Pistons could be the next to go. Follow me where I'm going. Devin Booker's from Michigan. Suns decide to build around Osar Thompson, Amen's brother. They get 2 firsts for Book. You say yes to this. Devin Booker for Thompson and 2 firsts.
I would say yes to this. You know, if you're Detroit, you're just dumping Tobias Harris's salary, so you're on board with that. I don't think you're a friend of the show, Kevin Herter, but I don't think that that's necessarily going to stop you in your tracks and say, no, can't trade it, Red Velvet. And then Osar Thompson, I think, would be the toughie for Detroit to really kind of grasp. He's a 23-year-old that it feels like he has a bright future ahead of him. But when you look at Detroit over the last 4 games, Cade Cunningham needs help, and he needs it desperately. Cade Cunningham is your Batman. Devin Booker can be that offensive creating Robin that it feels like the Detroit Pistons are lacking desperately. So it makes sense to me if I'm Phoenix, and you know what Detroit needs, and you know that Detroit might be desperate to run back what they had this past year and just add on to Cade Cunningham and give Cade Cunningham a little bit of help. If I'm Phoenix, I'm trying to squeeze some more draft picks out of that deal. The Phoenix Suns have 3 first-round picks over the next 5 years, and all of those will be the worst of a combination of 3 to 4 teams. So the Phoenix Suns aren't going to be drafting at the top of the draft until like 2033, and even then, there still might be some question marks. So if I'm Phoenix and I'm going into rebuild mode and I'm trying to get young and my sights are set on early 2030s far more than it is on 2027 or 2028, I would want some more draft picks to sweeten the pot.
Yeah, that's all I want. If I'm Phoenix, I'll take whatever salary dump you need me to take. I'll involve extra teams if I have to. I realize you have to match money to make so much of this work. I'll match the money and then just start getting rid of people. Because the number one thing I want to do is get more draft picks. So the only players I'm taking are players that I can offload to other teams for more draft picks. I just want picks. I got to be willing, because none of these guys, unless you believe that Thompson's going to be your SGA, and look, we didn't know SGA was going to be SGA. If the Clippers had known that, they wouldn't have traded him. I think that's probably a fair presumption, even for the Clippers, right? So SGA getting traded, we certainly didn't know at the time, none of us, that he was going to turn out to be what he is. If they believe in Phoenix that Thompson can be that, then heck yeah, I'll take him, and we'll make it all work, and it'll be sunshine and roses. But realistically, I care more about the draft picks. 3 first-rounders. Give me every first-round pick I can get out of every portion of this so I can try to start to rebuild this thing. Because even if you believe that you can build around Book, he's going to be 30 this year. It's going to take you 2 or 3 years to build something around him if you try and do it the right way. You don't really have the draft equity, to your point, to get that done. And by the time you build anything, you might have a 33, 34-year-old Devin Booker. What's the point of that, right? You're not getting enough return on all of this. And I will again caution every NBA fan that hasn't been paying attention. Remember, OKC's the number 1 seed. OKC this year was absolutely decimated by injuries. They're still the number 1 seed. They're the best team. And because of the trades that they've made, they still have a shot at the number 1 pick in the draft. So if you're Phoenix, you got to look at it and say, okay, to top that juggernaut, how many draft classes do I need? 3? 4? How long is it going to take me to build? So I want everything I can get. The problem is you're probably a little too late to get that level of return for Devin Booker. It's just easier to move on from a player early than it is to move on from a player late. So for my money, I look at all of this and I think, Caroline, man, there is this spot where I'd love to see Devin Booker go somewhere where he could win. I'd love the Suns to just rip this thing apart and try and make it work. I fear that for everybody involved, Booker's going to go somewhere where he wins a few games and that's cute. The Suns will get a little bit of a return and that's cute, but it won't result in chips for anybody.
See, I want to bring back your comparison, though, to the SGA Paul George trade, the Clippers OKC trade. The reason why I don't think it can or should be buyer beware is because nobody knew how bad of a trade that was when it happened. Actually, I think the Clippers were praised when they made this move, trying to, adding in Paul George, trying to capitalize on a winning window. It wasn't like the Luka trade that we all knew instantly, that's dumb, and you're going to be paying for that for years. It ended up looking like such a horrific trade because SGA became SGA. You can't second guess those kinds of trades like that. I think that OKC is the blueprint for Phoenix moving forward.
You're right. OKC's the blueprint. I just wonder, for a team to give up a king's ransom for Devin Booker, they got to believe they are on the precipice, on the edge. And maybe back to the original destination we printed for him, maybe going into Detroit would give him the opportunity to turn around and say, okay, now we can be the best in the East. I think maybe that's the opportunity. Detroit's going to have to take a long look in the mirror. So I can't imagine that if they end up getting eliminated, they don't try and figure something out to try and make this team drastically better going into next year. Because also, we've said this a million times, Caroline, but it's true. This was supposed to be a bridge year for the Celtics. It was supposed to be a transitional year for the Celtics. We all thought maybe the Celtics would try and tank. And instead, Celtics were the East favorite, according to Vegas, coming into this year's playoffs. So if you're Detroit, maybe you look at that man and say, you know what? That man right there can at least get us to the top of the East. And it feels like for several teams in the East, we'll get to this later in the show, just getting to the NBA Finals is the expectation. So obviously plenty of NBA action to come. We have more to get into from the NBA playoffs over the course of it. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit of the NFL with somebody that knows the Giants better than anybody. Osi Umenyiora joins us next.
Kick is on the way. And Dante Wright will bring it out of the end zone. Right across the 5, the 10, the 15. Right across the 20. Into New Mexico territory. 15, 10. 5. Does he get in?
He did.
Touchdown,
He did.
Pirates.
Dante Wright goes back. He played like a center fielder at Yankee Stadium and then takes it the length of the building. The young man was electric on that kick return.
Do you not enjoy this?
No,
Would you rather not do it?
that's not in the cards.
Why not?
It's not an option. I've worked so hard for so long. I've built myself up to a position and I've dug myself into a hole.
But I feel like you've reached a point in your life where, correct me if I'm wrong, you could do other things.
What am I gonna do? There's nothing like a fight night check. That's the beauty of fighting.
NFL teams tanking this season are making a huge mistake. Why, good sir?
Okay. This show has nefarious producers who fashion my idle comments over text into hot takes. And frankly, I'm fine with that, to be honest. Let's talk about Manning for a second. Someone who has not yet reached his potential by any measure. There will never be a player, in my opinion, that is a surefire lock that is worth burning an entire NFL season for.
Edwards has got it. Throw, tip, intercepted. Destin Mack, the INT. And he makes the biggest play of the game defensively for Orlando.
Great coverage on the back end by the Orlando Pirates. 4th down and 4. Destin Mack in coverage. Big time hit by Kyrie Coleman leads to the interception.
Things you love to see. The great Osi Umenyiora up on stage with Roger Goodell to announce the Giants pick last night. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's gone to 2 Pro Bowls. He joins us right now on the show. Osi, really appreciate you. How nerve-wracking is it when you get it? Walk me through this. I've always wondered. I practiced it in front of my mirror in case Raj ever calls me. When you're making the read, how nerve-wracking was it?
Listen, it would have been more nerve-wracking if I'd have actually gotten to speak, but, I didn't get to speak, so I just stood up there right by the commissioner. It was an honor to be there. It was a privilege to be right next to the guy. I had a great time being there in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was awesome.
It looked like an absolutely electric atmosphere. Every time they zoomed out on the camera, I was like, oh my God, there's more people. There's people for, miles and miles and miles. We mentioned the draft. Now we mentioned you getting to be up there for the Giants pick. One of those picks was Arvell Reese, a linebacker out of Ohio State. What did you make of the Arvell Reese pick?
Listen, I loved it. When you talk about John Harbaugh and what this man is about, he's about physicality. He wants his football teams to be physical. What is Arvell Reese? An outstanding athlete that is also very, very physical. A good football player. The old adage for the New York Giants has always been you can never have enough pass rushers, and this guy right here has the ability to be a special pass rusher if given the opportunity. Can also play linebacker. He can play everywhere along the front of that defense. This guy is going to be a good football player. I think it was a home run pick for the New York Giants.
Well, and people were reacting so positively afterwards because many of us thought he was the best defensive player. But the Jets went David Bailey. Did the Jets make the right call in going Bailey over Reese to you?
Listen, I'm never going to say the Jets made the right call about anything, right? I mean, even if they did, I'm never going to admit to it. But I think David Bailey also had a Texas Tech phenomenal football player, great edge rusher, can come off the edge, got good bend, good lean, good ability to get to the quarterback. The Jets need all the help they can get. I do believe he's going to be a good football player, but never in my entire life will I say they made the right pick over the New York Giants. Never.
Respect to that. Absolutely. When we were going through our winners and losers of the NFL draft, one of my losers was every quarterback in the NFC East because they're going to have to face that Giants defensive front. I mean, you add Arvell Reese to Abdul Carter and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, but that is a crowded defensive front room. It's a crowded pass rushing room in New York. Who will be the odd man out there in that room?
None of them. They're all going to play. Listen, I understand the question. I think it's a very good, a fair, legitimate question. But when you look at what the New York Giants have been built on, at least since I got there, even before I got there, it was having a multitude of pass rushers. You had Michael Strahan, and then you brought me in. Then you had me and Michael Strahan. What do? You bring in Justin Tuck. And then you have me, Strahan, and Tuck. What do? You bring in Matthias Kiwanuka. And then you have me, Tuck, Kiwanuka, Dave Thompson. What do? You bring in Jason Pierre-Paul. And this led to 2 Super Bowl championships, right? Along with the franchise quarterback and a good offensive line. So they are building the exact same replica of the same formula as they had that took them to the last 2 Super Bowl championships. They're going to find a way to get all those football players on the field. Brian Burns is phenomenal. Kayvon Thibodeau, I like this guy as a football player. I mean, you talk about Abdul Carter, who I thought was an outstanding pass rusher as a rookie. Now you bring in Arvell Reese. I think this team has the makings of a formidable front. They're going to get after the quarterback. I love it.
You know the New York media market better than anybody, and Malik Neighbors made news because he reacted to the pick. Harbaugh's come out and said they had a good conversation about it. What did we learn about Harbaugh and the way this locker room is going to relate to him in the way all of this went down?
Listen, I like the way he handled that, but for me, it was interesting watching Malik Neighbors make those comments. I was like, bro, you're a player. Just go out there and play. Your job isn't to be a general manager. Your job isn't to make this question or question whatever it is that the team is doing. So we need to get him healthy. He is a great football player, but I didn't like the fact that he was out there making comments about which direction the team was going on. That's what they do. They make picks. He makes plays, and he's done an outstanding job of that. Let's just try to focus more on that than commenting on what the team picks.
Well said, and I think a valid reaction to that. I still am getting used to seeing John Harbaugh with a Giants logo. It's going to take me a little bit, but how do you think John Harbaugh will impact this Giants team the most? How will we see the John Harbaugh effect with the New York Giants?
This is a very, very serious man, a very serious coach, right? He has won at the highest level. He has done this for a long period of time. The Giants needed to get back to that. The last coach I can think of that had this type of personality or this type of ability, from what I'm hearing anyway, I haven't been in Baltimore, but from what I'm hearing, Tom Coughlin, right? A very serious, strict, no-nonsense guy. And you're going to need that to deal with these personalities coming in. He has the resume. He has the pedigree. He has the talent around him. I think Joe has done a fantastic job of providing this team with a lot of talents. They just need to go out there and put it all together. I think this is the right pick. I think he's the guy who's going to get the job done for New York.
Osi, every time I see a new coach come into a team, it feels like there's one big transaction that happens. It's like a statement. And we saw Dexter Lawrence traded last week. Now that we've gotten through the draft and the dust is settled, was that the right move for the Giants?
I don't know if it was the right move or not. I didn't like the move. When you talk about a player of Dexter Lawrence's capability, this guy's one of the top 5 defensive players in football, and he has been that way for a while. If you look at what this guy's able to provide, the pressure up the middle, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. Believe it or not, when I was in college, I was a nose guard, and I got nowhere near the quarterback. So it is a very difficult thing for him to do. He pushes the pocket back. He creates plays for everybody else coming off the edge. He is a phenomenal football player. I don't know why they traded him. They must have had a very good reason, because the New York Giants are known for keeping the good players there under all circumstances, or at least when I was there. So that trade, there must have been some real acrimony between the teams. I didn't understand it. I didn't like it, but they had their reasons. Much love, much respect to Dexter Lawrence. Great football player.
He's a great football player. Do you think that he can make enough of a difference for the Cincinnati Bengals to get over that hump and find themselves not just in the postseason, but making a run in the postseason?
Well, that's going to be tough. I think when you look at them, they lost Trey Hendrickson, who I think is also a very good defensive end. You need more than one guy, and they have some good players there, but nobody on Dexter Lawrence's level, really, who is, right? So I think offensively, we know what they have with their receivers, with that quarterback. Defensively, they're going to have to do a lot better. He's going to help. I don't know if that's going to get them over the hump over those other teams in the NFC North.
All right, we need you to settle a
AFC
debate
North,
for Twitter.
sorry.
We need you to settle a debate on Twitter for us, Osi, because there was a viral debate this weekend. Eli Manning and Matt Ryan, all right? Ryan Parsa on X tweeted out, hot take, Matt Ryan was a better quarterback than Eli Manning. People just worship rings. Manning with a Hall of Fame caliber response when he said, I'll ponder this while I play with my rings. Love every ounce of this. You get to settle the debate. Better quarterback, Matt Ryan, Eli Manning.
I'm staying away from that one, man. I'm sorry. and listen, I'm going to tell you why I'm staying away from that. Because obviously I played with Eli for an extended period of time, 10 years, a good friend of mine, great quarterback. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He should be in the Hall of Fame. But I also played 2 years in Atlanta, got to spend some time with Matt Ryan, got to know him a little bit, and he is a fantastic quarterback too. So, I can't say, oh, this guy is much better than him. I had a lot more success with Eli. I have a lot better relationship with Eli, but Matt was a great player also. So I'm gonna kindly bow out of that one, man. I'm sorry, guys. I apologize.
Well done. Well done.
Osi says, you're not going to clip me off today. No, I'm not getting trapped today. But let's stick on the theme of Giants quarterbacks then, because Jackson Dart is coming into year 2 when he had a concussion-riddled year 1. From what you've seen from him on the field and his attitude, from what the Giants have put around him over the last couple of off seasons, can he be the savior for the New York Giants franchise?
No doubt about that. When you look at him on the field last year, the production that he had, the ability that this man has, and on top of that, the moxie, the charisma. I mean, this guy has everything necessary to be a New York Giants quarterback, man. He has the je ne sais quoi, as we like to say out here in Europe. I'm in the UK, by the way. I know that's French, but I'm in the UK. But anyway, he has that, and this team rallies around him. They love this guy down there in New York. I was just there a little while ago visiting with the team. They love him. So he has the ability. All we need to do now, or all he needs to do, is find a way to keep himself healthy. If you look at the upgrades they've had on this offensive line, those 2 tackles that they have, Andrew Thomas, Illuminor, and then they bring in the rookie. I don't really know how to say his name yet, but I think he's going to be a really good player also. You put all those people together in front of him, he's going to be protected. He's going to sit back there like a warm, in a warm little blanket, man, and make plays for this football team. I think he's the guy going forward. I love him as a QB.
You mentioned you're in Europe. That leads me to the fact that you lead NFL Africa, running camps there to develop talent, feed players into the NFL's international player pathway. The IPP is a really cool program within the league. Tell everybody, how's that going and what it means to you?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Even being from, the New York Giants, the biggest success that we've had so far has been Jordan Mailata, who plays left tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. Wish he would have gone to New York, but he has been an outstanding football player. He came through the program. He's an all-pro. And we have several players coming through from Africa right now. We have Haggai Ndubuisi. We have Chu Godric, who's playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. We have CJ Okoye, who's playing for the Baltimore Ravens. We have a lot of players who are actually on rosters who never played football before, and they're playing meaningful snaps in the NFL. So to see what this has been able to do, and to be able to give hope to all these people from all these different countries who now can say, hey, if that guy can do it, if that guy can do it, if that guy can do it, I have the ability to do it. And, just broadening the game, broadening the scope of the NFL, I think is a fantastic thing. We're really, really proud of the program. We're going to continue to do it. And hopefully we can continue to bring in these fantastic athletes and give them opportunities.
And one of those players that has been commanding a lot of headlines, and I apologize if I butcher the pronunciation of his first name, Lior Bernard, who is part of the NFL Nigeria program, was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. He's never played a down of organized football, but the Eagles just looked at the intangibles, the sheer size of him, and says, yeah, we can absolutely work with that. What do you know about him, and what does his future look like in the NFL?
Well, he came from our program, the program that we run in Nigeria, the Uprise program. And so the NFL Africa program also got him from there. He's a fantastic athlete, big guy, strong, intelligent, hardworking. When you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, it's not a surprise to me that they took him because, number one, they've had success from the program already. Jordan Mailata, they believed in him. They developed him over a number of years, and we saw him turn into an all-pro. They believe this guy has the same capabilities or the same ability, and they have a plan. They know it's going to take a long time to get this guy where he needs to be, and they've done a really good job of that. So really proud of him, really happy for him. But I think everybody needs to understand we've had players who have never played football before who are actually in the NFL right now playing meaningful snaps. So he's not the first guy. There's been a blueprint of this happening before. Really proud of him and really proud of all the guys who we've had come through.
the player pathway is a huge part of international growth for the league. You can have games over there, but until people start getting the opportunity to play it, it never grows the way it could. So, Osi, great work by you. Really an honor and a pleasure. Like, we got goosebumps talking to you this morning. It's great. We can talk to you for an hour. We appreciate your time and your insight, my friend. You got to come back and hang out with us again. We appreciate you.
Got you. Amazing. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks so much, Osi.
All right. Speaking of the NFL, Mike Tomlin speaks. What's it mean and what do we take away from it? We'll tell you about it next.
Does Orlando win it in overtime, or does this instant classic continue? Deep drop and throw, end zone, Thomas Owens. That's an Orlando overtime winner. That is the most decorated receiver in the history of the franchise. Of course, he's the one to end it.
He's like 6'5", 230, like insane athlete, really, really good arm. And I don't know if he'll ever be the fourth best quarterback in the league where he's like Josh Allen, kind of like always in, MVP conversations, but he can be in the Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott tier where he's like kind of always quarterback 7-ish and like can have those years and moments where he's playing like an all-pro. Like that to me is the best outcome.
What put you over the top to like, I want to go to Indiana?
I was really close to going to a couple other schools. However, the point that really cemented me into Indiana is Coach Signetti really focusing on the development. His big selling point was, hey, I don't know, like other schools are trying to sell you on if we're going to win a national championship, if we're going to win all these games. I just know one thing I can do is develop quarterbacks.
It's all about alignment and assignment, whether you're playing junior high football or IFL football. Myler fakes the give, goes the other way with it. He launches himself into the end zone, and he's going to get the touchdown.
That's just a dynamic effort. That is a will to want to get it in the end zone there because he knew that he was running out of space.
Yes.
And so he thought there's only one way you can go here, and that's up and over.
Former Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin has reached agreement on a deal to join NBC as a top studio analyst on its Sunday night pregame show, Football Night in America. That per Andrew Marchand. Plenty of changes coming to Football Night in America, a total restacking here. But we finally start to hear from Tomlin. Tomlin made his first appearance since leaving the Steelers on NBC this Sunday in a sit-down with Maria Taylor, and a lot came from that. Most noteworthy, Tomlin said he believes Aaron Rodgers will be returning to the Steelers in 2026. Caroline, does he know something we don't?
Yeah, I think that he does. Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers are tight. Like they're bestie pops. If you go back to some interviews that Aaron Rodgers did last summer, his offseason before going to Pittsburgh, he talked a lot about one big reason why he did decide to go to the Steelers is because he loved Mike Tomlin, his relationship with Mike Tomlin. So understanding that, I don't think Mike Tomlin is saying anything as definitive as that, of that he believes Aaron Rodgers will be a Steeler next year, without one, Aaron Rodgers' blessing, and two, without having some information that we don't know. But let me just say, if Aaron Rodgers feels as confident as I believe he would if he told Mike Tomlin to say, yeah, I believe he'll be in Pittsburgh next year, why don't we know? Like why not just say, yeah, come out and say it publicly or sign a contract? Like, why does it always have to be so difficult with Aaron Rodgers? Why does it always have to be this long, drawn out thing that he finally decides to sign a contract like in June, 1 week before training camp? Why does it always have to be some big old saga? So I do believe he knows something that we don't know, but why don't we know? Why does it always have to be this with Aaron? It's exhausting.
Well, I mean, look, shocking, breaking news. Mike Tomlin knows something about Aaron Rodgers that most of us sitting in front of a microphone don't. Like, that seems to make a lot of sense. And you're right, it is exhausting. But also the other side of this is, look, how many times have we said over the course of the last several months, the Steelers know Aaron Rodgers is coming back, Aaron Rodgers knows Aaron Rodgers is coming back. Mike Tomlin knows Aaron Rodgers is coming back. And through all of that, important to note, Mike Tomlin and the Steelers are no longer together. They still parted ways. So I don't think that Mike Tomlin left or was fired or however we want to take that. Like Mike Tomlin and the Steelers parted ways. I don't think that happened without Tomlin already knowing that Aaron Rodgers was coming back. So to all of that, I'd say, okay, even if Tomlin knows, and I believe he does, that still wasn't enough to make him want to stay in Pittsburgh or to make the Steelers want to keep him there either way. Either way, they looked at it and said, we're not going to just run it back. And so change for the sake of change isn't always great change. But clearly, to me, this sends a message that Aaron Rodgers is making it clear to the people around him that he's coming back. And even through that clarity that they have, there was still massive change in the organization. I just think this speaks to where the Steelers are headed, right? Like, the Steelers have to understand running it back with Tomlin every year isn't going to work. Well, the Steelers should also have to understand at some point that running it back with Aaron Rodgers every year isn't going to work. They understand that if they want to get to the next level, they're going to have to figure out other solutions. The Tomlin one was easier. They had a clearer path to a new coach than they do to a new quarterback. But I'd be shocked, even if he comes back for a year, the Steelers have to know internally that the process of finding their long-term quarterback is not getting easier. It's only getting harder. The other noteworthy quote was him saying he felt like the leaders in the locker room deserve the excitement of new leadership, really singling out, calling out Hayward Bay and Boswell by name as people. We didn't have a lot of success in the playoffs. Guys like Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Boswell that I thought were worthy of the excitement and optimism associated with new leadership. Talking just about the fact that those guys deserve a new voice and that new excitement. What do we make of it?
I think it's weird that he called out specific players. Mike Tomlin has been around football for a very long time, and he knows anything and everything he says is going to picked and apart and prodded and analyzed and overanalyzed and put in a headline. It just feels strange to me that somebody that knows that calls out TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and almost like brings them into the situation. Now, I believe the next time TJ Watt and Cam Hayward get in front of a microphone, they're going to be asked. And I think that a reporter would be doing their job if they do ask the question of how much say did you have in Mike Tomlin's exit? Did you really need, a refreshed perspective at the head coaching position? I just felt like, even if it's true, I felt like Mike Tomlin brought in his star veteran players, former players, for no reason. We all kind of know. We all know why Mike Tomlin didn't go back to Pittsburgh, right? We all know that Pittsburgh probably looked at it and said, going 9-8 and getting into the playoffs, barely scraping into the playoffs and losing in the first round of the postseason is not good enough for us anymore. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So it was the Pittsburgh Steelers organization acknowledging, look, we need something new. We need something refreshed. And Mike Tomlin probably said, yeah, I agree with you. And we'll just, we'll shake hands and then we'll ride off into the sunset and going our separate ways. I just didn't think that specific players named needed to be mentioned in that.
To me, and it's funny because I hadn't thought of it the way you just mentioned it. I just took it as a cheesy coach being a cheesy coach. And I don't mean cheesy necessarily in a negative way. We all have friends that speak in motivational quotes. Like we all have friends that we feel like just live in the book of lions, don't worry about the opinion. Like that sort of, like it's just one of those things. And every player that I've ever had the fortune of calling a friend or just getting to sit down and talk to that has played with the Steelers organization laughs at Tomlinisms. Like they're known. We talk about him. And this is what's going to make him great on TV for a minute. But I read this and I thought, man, even when you're back on TV and you're not on the sideline, even when you're out of the game in the same way, you're still turning around and being that cheesy coach. You're still talking about, well, this guy deserves this and this guy deserves that. And I wonder, because we're all going to tune in. I'm going to tune in. I can't wait to watch Mike Tomlin on TV for a minute. But I question, is he the type of person that's going to be harsh enough in his critiques to really say what needs to be said? I don't know, because I think he speaks in these generalisms and these glowing remarks that just make everybody, feel good in that moment. I wonder what kind of TV it's going to make for. I genuinely read it as, yep, the guy that's going to be back on the sidelines in a year is still reminding everybody that he's all about the players and the players deserve the shine and the credit and the players deserve everything. And I'm just a coach and, it's all about you guys and not about me. And that's how I read the quote. But also I read it as just a bit of a propaganda thing that doesn't necessarily feel real. And that's going to be interesting to me on TV. Is Mike Tomlin willing to sort of let some of that guard down and speak truth, because he knows more football than any of us, and he can give us more insight than any of us. I would love to hear the truth from Mike Tomlin, but I wonder on the course of his broadcast if we'll actually get truth, or if we'll just glaze donuts that all of a sudden make you feel sweet and happy, but don't actually answer any of the questions of the how and the why with the toughness that you need to have when you have the mind that he has and you can offer the education to the world that Mike Tomlin can offer. In the meantime, obviously the Steelers going to figure out what this new regime looks like. We got plenty more football to get to, but coming up next, Rookie of the Year was so close. How close? One of the most historic votes ever. Cooper wins it. We'll tell you about it next.
Another matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. How are these teams going to guard each other?
If you're Denver, you're going to have to find a comfort throwing different coverages at Minnesota and Anthony Edwards. It can't just be one thing. The same goes for Nikola Jokic, where honestly, whatever you do, I'm eventually going to get to a point where you do not feel comfortable with how you are guarding me, no matter who's on me.
Handoff, Thomas busting it through for the end zone. Touchdown! Tavion Thomas and Tucson back in front with 16 seconds left. 1 second, final play of the game. Jerome Johnson looking in the end zone. Johnson, far corner, jump ball, knocked into the crowd. Game over. Tucson wins.
Playing basketball with your back to the basket and not able to see the floor in the same way was a whole lot different for LeBron. And so that's why it took a little bit for him to feel comfortable in that back to the basket positioning. He's got more post-ups this postseason than Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, and Alperen Şengün combined. This is a huge story, and what a wrinkle that LeBron James has thrown into this series.
When you guys talk about your relationship and your friendship and your respect, there are some people who think like, well, do they want to kill each other? Do they want to fight each other? Do they want to hurt each other? You have to do that when you fight someone.
Yeah. If you have like females sparring in the gym, like it's really hard to not to go heavy. Like women just like, they cut that, you know, emotional thing off and they just like, it's me or you. And Rhonda has that, I have that.
Los Angeles Lakers star Austin Reeves is optimistic to return to action in Game 5 against the Rockets. That, according to Shams. Remember, he missed about 4 weeks with the grade 2 oblique strain. So it'll be a game-time decision for the third consecutive contest. If you're a Lakers fan right now, especially after watching them right on the brink, but not quite get it done, there has to be some hope here, understanding, Caroline, that Reeves is going to come back in. But it's been a minute. He's going to need a little bit of time to get back into game action.
Which I think is fine. The Lakers were able to beat the Rockets in 3 consecutive games without not just Austin Reeves, but also without Luka Doncic. Now, I understand that they dropped Game 4, but I also don't think that LeBron James is going to score 10 points and turn the ball over 8 times in very many more games. So even if Austin Reeves needs some ramping up period, even if Austin Reeves still isn't 100% from the oblique strain, I still think that this is a Lakers team that is more than capable in beating the Houston Rockets, especially with how kind of dejected at times the Houston Rockets have looked, especially at times when it feels like the Houston Rockets struggled to generate offense against a middle of the pack at best Lakers defense. It feels like JJ Redick has kind of put Ime Udoka in a blender with what JJ Redick has been able to draw up defensively. So I understand that the Lakers are coming off of a loss, but also even with a less than 100% Austin Reeves, even with an Austin Reeves that's still kind of trying to get back into the swing of things, they're better than they were in the first 4 games of this series. And the Lakers have been the better team for 3 out of those 4 games. So, if I'm the Lakers, this is just a net positive. And if I'm the Lakers, you're just trying to wrap things up as quickly as possible. And once you get Luka Doncic back, you're optimistic for what can happen next.
Yeah, optimism also carries through the rest of the series to me because certainly if he's optimistic about game 5 but can't go, what's that mean for game 6? And this is where the playoff schedule also helps
100%.
a little bit. They played on Sunday. They don't play tonight. They play tomorrow. So they get an extra day of rest, extra day of opportunity, and then the next game would be on Friday. So if he's on the verge of being able to return right now, that means I feel even better that he might be able to get in on Friday, which gives even more time for Austin Reeves. Certainly, this is less about the Rockets. I mean, I know I sound like a broken record to anyone that's been watching the show over and over again, but I heavily favored the Lakers in this series. Lakers are, I think, going to win this series. This is less about the Rockets to me and more about can Austin Reeves get a game under his belt against the Rockets to start to knock some of that rust off because they're going to need every ounce of Austin in the next series. We still don't really know if or when to have any manageable expectations on Luka, certainly. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a huge moment for Lakers fans that can breathe a sigh of relief and try and figure out if it's not just about this series, but also the rest of the playoffs. Now, Lakers fans feel great. Cleveland fans, not so much. I love this tweet that is out there happening right now. It's a little disrespectful, but who doesn't love a little bit of playoff disrespect? As they're out here calling him Charmin soft. So Mobley and Allen depicted as ultra soft Charmin, which is great. Like at least it's a mega rolls and it's ultra soft. We'll bring in ESPN senior NBA writer Brian Windhorst back on Yahoo Sports Daily. Thanks, Winnie. We appreciate the time. Let's start with that. The Cavs feel like they're spiraling. Fan base is losing their minds. How do you think the Cavs' Game 4 loss is sitting with players and coaches as we speak?
Well, they're still 2-2 in the series. They're not like in real panic mode yet. But it was a humongous missed opportunity because, you see what's happening on that side of the bracket. Orlando is ahead 3-1. Detroit is really struggling. And even Orlando, they just lost Franz Wagner. We don't know for how long. He had a calf injury last night. The pathway is there to get what the Cavs want, which is to advance deeper in the playoffs this year. That's really been their mandate, and they could have really put the Raptors on ice. I mean, regardless what anybody wants to say about the game, what anybody wants to, point to, stats or rotations or adjustments or whatever, or memes or whatever you want to call it, they're up 8 points with 4 minutes to go. And they have James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, and they couldn't get a basket and they couldn't get a rebound. And so really what happened in games 3 and 4 was Harden, Mitchell, and Evan Mobley all played about the worst you could expect them to play under the circumstances. And it cost them 2 games. And there's going to be a price for it. There's going to be a price for the Cavs losing, particularly game 4, where Toronto just really shot the ball historically badly for a team that won a game. 50 years type stuff. And so the question is, what's the price going to be? Is the price going to be that you have to play an extra game in the series, that you have to win it in 6? Is the price going to be you have to play 7? Is the price going to be you lose the series? Is the price going to be you have to play an extra game and one of your players turns an ankle, or you start the next series out of position, or worse? But there will be a price to pay for losing that game. What's only left to determine is how steep that price will be.
So let's live in a world where the Cavs have yet another earlier than anticipated exit from the postseason. What could it mean for Donovan Mitchell, for Evan Mobley, even head coach Kenny Atkinson? What does that mean for their future in Cleveland?
Well, we're not there yet. We'd have to see how that type of situation would develop. I think, I get the vibe from people out of Cleveland. They think they're behind in this series. They're not behind. If they get the situation where they would lose in this round, I think that you would have to ask some very tough questions. But they traded for James Harden and have invested heavily in Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell for this exact moment, to be in a series 2-2 where you have the chips on the table and they deliver. Now, the thing about it is, those guys have a checkered history when it comes to these moments. If you look at James Harden, believe it or not, he has been around so long. This is actually the 13th time in his career that he's been in a game 5 where the series has been 2-2. 13th time. And I'm going to tell you, the results are not settling. The last 3 times he's been in this situation, he shot 33% and averaged 12 points. If you go a little farther back, he's had a couple of games where he scored in 30s and led his team to victories, this decade. Donovan Mitchell has a long history of great games in the playoffs, and unfortunately, a long history of duds, including Game 4. Evan Mobley in games 1 and 2 was everything the Cavs wanted him to be when they signed him to a max contract last year. And everything that is used against him that meme suggests in game 3 and 4. So, this team has a wide variance about who they can be. They could have a streak of 3 straight weeks where they play great basketball and they're in the conference finals. We've seen them do it. But they've also had times where they have completely let chances go through their fingertips. They show their worst sides of themselves, and they could, in fact, be home by the end of the week. I would say it's more likely they advance than they get home. But if they are home by the end of the week, there will be consequences. What they will be, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. The most important thing for this franchise is that Donovan Mitchell has a contract extension decision this summer. He has shown no indication at all that he will not sign that contract extension. However, if he does not, you have a 5-alarm fire. And so what the Cavs are trying to avoid is the sirens in the distance. And so a lot will be determined about that come these next couple of games.
Okay, from people not meeting expectations to the opposite of that. Let's talk LeBron, because this is basketball. We have to. All right, but let's get some context here. You can offer perspective, very few can. How does this series versus the Rockets rank amongst his all-time accolades with what he's had to do essentially by himself?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about LeBron is that every postseason sort of has its own story. Some of those stories are very, very rich in incredible accomplishments and detail. Some of those stories are loaded with disappointment. Obviously, it's a lot more of accomplishment than disappointment. This particular playoff story, out of all the playoffs he's ever played in, it's something in the neighborhood of 19 or 20 times he's been in the playoffs. This is a unique pathway where he completely played one style of basketball for the season and then was asked to play sort of a throwback style of basketball. And, to me, this isn't just about this series. It's also about the last few games of the regular season when Reeves and Luka got hurt and they had to downshift into LeBron at point guard, being the high volume, high usage player again. And he led them to 4 wins to close the season to secure home court. Like, that's a part of this story. And then you look at the games that he's had early in the season, and then the incredible clutch play at the end of game 3 where he gets the steal on Reed Shepherd and then nails that, incredibly clutch 3-pointer, to force overtime, essentially. These are very, rich details in what's been a remarkable playoff run. I do think, however, he's hitting a bit of a breaking point. The Rockets are really, really pressuring him. He's had a ton of turnovers the last couple of games. That can't go on. And, the whole strategy is to wear him out. And I do think that there were some signs of him showing fatigue in game 4. So that's why getting Austin Reeves back potentially in game 5, even if Reeves is not himself, even to just take some of the scoring burden and some of the ball handling burden and some of the offensive creation burden off his plate is going to be really, really important. Because if they get one more win, which I believe they will, they're facing the Thunder. And the Thunder, if you turn the ball over against them, will embarrass you. And they will do it within the first 5 minutes of the game. And the way that the Lakers have played in this series is admirable and, deserves praise and everything like that. But they have turned the ball over like drunken sailors. And they've gotten away with it because Houston is a very flawed team. But they cannot do that going forward. And so it'd be a good place to start shutting the turnovers down tomorrow night in game 5.
I mean, there's no doubt, at least in the first 3 games, LeBron James felt like he went into a time machine, 41-year-old LeBron looking like 21-year-old LeBron. But I want to look at the flip side of the series and the Houston Rockets side of things. Kevin Durant has rightfully so gotten a lot of criticism. Sure, he led the Rockets in scoring in game 2, but turned the ball over 9 times. There's been a lot of discussion about maybe some off-the-court things that have been said. Are we looking at the end of KD in Houston already? What's next for Kevin Durant?
I mean, I think first off, he's injured. Okay, that's one thing that the people have to understand. He hurt his knee early in the series, and then he hurt his ankle midway through the series. So part of what you're dealing with is a player who's hurt, and I think it's difficult to evaluate a player who's hurt. when it comes to Houston's going forward, Houston has a couple of significant challenges. One is that they are limited in what they can do to add to this roster, because even though they've got draft picks of other teams, they're not going to get high draft picks going forward. They built this team through high draft picks and 2 star transactions, which was signing Fred VanVleet in free agency and then trading for Kevin Durant. Their hand is a little bit limited here in how they can improve when they're looking up at trying to figure out how they would beat San Antonio in 4 out of 7 and how they would beat Oklahoma City in 4 out of 7. And with the state of their roster right now, they're not beating the Lakers in 4 out of 7. And so the question Houston has to ask itself, even if Durant was playing brilliantly and was not having any issues in the locker room, and as far as the locker room goes, there's a lot of speculation about what's going on in the locker room. I don't know what's going on in there. There's speculation. What I can tell you on the court is he's not played his best basketball. But even if he had played his best basketball, this team was going to have a challenge to how to figure out how to deal with those monsters in the Western Conference without the ability to dramatically upgrade their roster. So what I'm saying to you is they may have had to look at trades no matter what happened in this season to try to address the improving their roster to the next level. They have really needed Reed Shepherd to take a big step forward. That did not happen this year. They really needed Amen Thompson to become like an all-star level player. That was sort of, the pathway was laid out for that. That did not happen this year. They needed Dorian Finney-Smith to be a 3-and-D player. That was a big signing that they made, investing in him and putting him on their books for the next couple of years. That did not happen. They have not had last year, I felt like everything they touched turned to gold, roster and organization wise. This year, everything they've touched has gone sour, including giving Steven Adams a contract extension and then see him hurt his knee again. Betting on Reed Shepherd being able to be their backup point guard, and then Fred VanVleet getting hurt a couple of days before training camp. A lot of things have not gone their way. They're going to have to address that this offseason, and it's not as simple as saying, well, just move Kevin Durant. So it's a complicated, multi-layered, nuanced thing, and it's going to be a challenge for them, I think.
Windy, given the fact that LeBron is just superhuman, is there a world in your mind where a 41-year-old LeBron outlasts the 37-year-old KD in the NBA?
I mean, I think Kevin defensively is not the player he used to be, but offensively remains an incredibly potent player. Has shown the ability to continue scoring at a high level. What I think you can say is that LeBron is a better point guard than Kevin Durant at this point in their career. And unfortunately, that they've both been pressed into that role with issues with their teams. And LeBron handled that a lot better than Kevin handled that. But that is not a referendum on where they are as players. I still think Kevin Durant has good years left. The question is, with this Rockets aligned this way, is that the best spot for him? With the Lakers, I think one thing we've learned is that the Lakers may in fact be the best spot for LeBron going forward, and it's really a matter of how they work out a deal. I think with the entire Rockets team, I think there's a lot of question marks up and down, with Kevin just being one of them.
I want to go from players to coaches. What have you heard on what's next for Steve Kerr?
I think Steve Kerr has sent the message out that he would be very interested in returning to coach the Warriors. But what I think people have misunderstood about this is not a straight emotional decision. Like, do I have it within me to coach the Warriors or not? There's not a contract sitting on the table. It's not like the Warriors said, hey, man, sign this at any time, whenever you feel like it. They did not have contract extension discussions. They called those off. Steve called those off. He is making the highest salary amongst all NBA coaches at $17 million. And, the team has not performed. That's a championship competition level salary. This team is not a championship contender right now. The other thing, and my colleagues Ramona Shelburne and Anthony Slater have reported on this, there is some desire within the organization that Steve Kerr potentially change his coaching staff. There's some desire from Steve Kerr to change some strategy, particularly offensively. Now, that is not a controversial statement. When a team that is this expensive and this veteran underachieves and misses the playoffs, to say that you want potential changes is not, that's not a shocking thing. But, the question is Kerr willing to make those changes? Is Kerr willing to coach for, a different salary next year? Like, these are the real questions. This is where the rubber meets the road. I mean, he obviously has to ask himself the question about whether he can invest himself in the job, but he's indicated that he'd like to. This might come down to a negotiating thing. It might not be sentimental at all. This might be good old-fashioned negotiating, and Steve Kerr can leave the sideline and walk right into a broadcasting job in a selection of places for big money and an easier life. So his leverage is there, that he has that out there. So this is not the framing of I think people think that this is just does he wipe away the tears and sign the contract? There's other things to be dealt with here.
Speaking of things to be dealt with before we get you out of here, Windy, Book, the Suns get swept. Is there massive change coming in Phoenix?
They can't really be massive change. They don't have a lot of assets. They don't have their draft picks. They're pretty. They signed Devin Booker to a contract that will approach $70 million. He has not been an all-star player since signing that contract. So, frankly, even if they wanted to trade him, I don't think they could get good value for him right now. So I think they're probably lined up to try to improve the roster that they have. Try to have some of their young players, which they leaned into some young players. They've done some decent job actually drafting the last couple of years. Obviously they have big hopes and expectation for Kon Knueppel, who they used a lottery pick on. It was a primary piece that they got back for Kevin Durant. So they're hoping that he can grow into the shot blocking rim protector that organization really needs as he develops. I think the Suns, I respect that what the Suns did with really turning their fortunes around and, cutting Bradley Beal and everything like that. But their ceiling in the short term, I think, is a little bit limited. But it was a good step forward year for them. I just don't know how much more they can step forward under the current circumstances.
Follow him on Twitter, X Windhorst, ESPN. Watch him all day. I know it's a grind for you today, man. We appreciate your time. Brian Windhorst, Windy, always appreciate you, my friend.
Have a great week, guys.
Thanks, Windy.
It's great stuff from Windy. From one guest to another. We're just going to keep the superstars coming. Windy just did God's work. Stephen Godfrey going to join us next. We'll get Godfrey's thoughts on yet another gambling controversy in sports coming up next. Godfrey.
Kick is on the way. And Dante Wright will bring it out of the end zone. Right across the 5, the 10, the 15. Right across the 20. Into New Mexico territory. 15, 10, 5. Does he get in?
He did.
Touchdown, Pirates.
Dante Wright goes back. He played like a center fielder at Yankee Stadium and then takes it the length of the building. The young man was electric on that kick return.
Do you not enjoy this?
No.
Would you rather not do it?
That's not in the cards.
Why not?
It's not an option. I've worked so hard for so long. I've built myself up to a position and I've dug myself into a hole.
But I feel like you've reached a point in your life where, correct me if I'm wrong, you could do other things.
What am I going to do? There's nothing like a fight night check. That's the beauty of fighting.
NFL teams tanking this season are making a huge mistake. Why, good sir?
Okay. This show has nefarious producers who fashion my idle comments over text into hot takes. And frankly, I'm fine with that, to be honest. Let's talk about Manning for a second. Someone who has not yet reached his potential by any measure. There will never be a player, in my opinion, that is a surefire lock that is worth burning an entire NFL season for.
Edwards has got it. Throw, tip, intercepted. Destin Mack, the INT. and he makes the biggest play of the game defensively for Orlando.
Great coverage on the back end by the Orlando Pirates. 4th down and 4. Destin Mack in coverage. Big time hit by Kyrie Coleman leads to the interception.
Texas Tech quarterback Brendan Sorsby is taking a leave of absence from the football program for a gambling addiction, the school has announced. For that and more on that and what it all means, we're going to be joined now by our good friend Stephen Godfrey as we try and figure out what to make of it. So Sorsby placed bets on Indiana while on the Hoosiers roster in 2022. He didn't appear in any game that season that he bet on, but we want to get a breakdown. So why does the while on Indiana's roster component matter so much here, Godfrey?
Well, thanks for having me. We're going to have a really fun discussion today, and that's going to be about how we in the media represent one thing and then we do another, okay? So the reason why the people who clutch pearls are clutching their pearls this morning or yesterday when this news broke is because Brendan Sorsby was on the Indiana roster when he made those bets, and that is supposed to be the cardinal sin, the thing you should never do, what Pete Rose spent the last 30 years of his life defending or complaining about. My personal feeling, guys, is that was he betting for them or against them, right? What do we always say on those inspirational posters? Bet on yourself, right? So if he wanted to throw $20 on his team winning, is that the end of the world? There is also news I saw this morning that USA Today reported that Cincinnati had, according to USA Today, had awareness of Sorsby's gambling habit going into last season. So I don't know if the width and the scope of this story has been fully revealed yet in public, for what it's worth. So that's why people are upset. I don't know how you guys feel about this personally, but it's going to be a hard one to discuss because we're talking about sports betting. And in 2026, that means we're talking about sports media because God knows that sports betting is essentially what's propped up a lot of sports media in the last couple of years.
Well, Pete Thamel reported that Brendan Sorsby bet, quote, thousands of bets or placed thousands of bets on a gambling app. And I think a lot of people's first reaction was, oh my gosh, that's so bad. Look, and if he's breaking the NCAA rules, that's an NCAA problem, and you can't do that. But why is it the NCAA's responsibility? Why is it our responsibility to make sure that athletes aren't placing thousands of bets on a gambling app as long as it's within the NCAA guidelines? Like, why is this different than, a football player drinking 6 beers on a Thursday night, but not harming anyone in the process?
Because they're worried about the integrity of their product. If the brand is misrepresented as being essentially faulty, in other words, if the NCAA and all the different member institutions and all the governing bodies don't come down and look really, really aggressive about this, what they're worried about is the perception that it's rigged, that we're talking about pro wrestling all of a sudden. And if you do that,
he's betting on baseball? What if he's betting on basketball?
No, look, I totally agree with you. I think, I took a different tact. We talked about this on today's College Football Inquirer. It will be on this wonderful streaming app here, I think this afternoon. We did a whole segment. There are some loopholes and some permitted. There's technically some permitted usage of gambling apps, so long as it's not in your sport, and so long as it doesn't. Again, the sort of unspoken cardinal rule, as long as it doesn't involve your team. I have a problem with a lot of this because we are about to punish an individual and potentially change or end his career and his livelihood. Because he, in my opinion, based off of the information that we have publicly at this moment, was not engaged in a dishonest attempt to profit off of his position. So what am I saying? I'm saying he wasn't betting against Indiana. He wasn't even playing. But if news comes out that he was betting against Cincinnati in games that they lost, then we got to change what we're talking about. But as it stands right now, I want to be really clear with the audience here why I think that this is a disingenuous of sports media and of sports organizations like the NCAA, is that this is very clearly to me the behavior of a young person who's addicted to gambling. We have incentivized gambling to the point where it is a massive problem on college campuses, specifically with young people and most specifically with young men. There are a lot of studies out right now that the college age generation, they're drinking less, they're having sex less, they're using drugs less. One of the things that has skyrocketed exponentially is the use of gambling. You're now seeing support groups spring up on campuses for young people, again, mainly young men, who are finding themselves tens of thousands of dollars in debt from using gambling apps. The way that we structure these gambling apps and the way that we have structured gambling in America, it's not like, hey, I'm going to go to Vegas this weekend, I'm going to have a good time, and I'm going to put $20 down on an NBA game. And I use that anecdote because the first time I ever actually placed a bet on a game, and I don't really gamble in sports. I just don't care. It's not my thing. It's not what I'm into. Although every time I do a program, and we do it here on Yahoo, people say, hey, I need you to pick a college football game against the spread. We're going to do a segment on it. So I want to be transparent about that. But, when I was in my 20s, the first time I did that in Vegas, I put $20 on a Hawks playoff game, and okay, great. What we're talking about with Brendan Sorsby, if you read the details of the report, he was down to the point of the throes of addiction, in my opinion, where you're betting dollars on balls and strikes in individual MLB games. That is not a sign to me that someone was engaged in a master plot to deceive the world to make money off of his position as a college quarterback. This is an addict. This is someone who is fighting a loss of the dopaminergic process where he's seeking something by hitting these apps. And it's a completely different generation. I'm older than college football players, obviously, so I have a tough time relating, but the cell phone generation of kids became gamblers in a way that we can't really experience or understand. And so this morning, to now look at this news and to see the histrionic response of other people, I'm kind of thinking, like, what did you expect? We trained a generation of people to do this. We legalized gambling across every platform. We made it super easy to do. Then we made it to where you could gamble on literally anything. You guys see in the news, there was a U.S. Special Forces operative who made $400,000 on the Maduro raid in Venezuela. This isn't a sports problem anymore. This is a worldwide problem. So I have a hard time thinking believing that this kid's career should end because of what is obviously an addictive pattern, right? To me, this is no different than the Sackler family and opioids or handing every soldier in World War II a free pack of cigarettes. Like, we developed an addiction process to create a large consumer base. Why are we shocked that athletes are a part of this? Of course they're a part of this.
So context for everybody, for anyone that doesn't know, I'm from Vegas. So I grew up in Vegas. My mom was the first manager at a casino for a woman ever in the 70s. When she was pregnant with me, at that point, no woman had ever had maternity leave. So I grew up around casinos. I say that because I also grew up with the massive, like when I moved out of Vegas as a little kid, the first thing people always ask is like, oh, do you gamble all the time? No. Like, I grew up understanding you don't go in the casino because, and then I spent how much of my life touring in country music where we played casinos. And I always said, I'm not going to gamble away my money every single night I'm in a casino. So I grew up around it. It's very normalized for me. To your point, I last year discovered I could bet on balls and strikes, and I loved it. It was a blast for me. It's some of the most fun I've ever had gambling. So I push back a little bit that that's an indication of addiction. The thing I would say is that's actually what made baseball fun for me to watch. As somebody that didn't like baseball, how I got into it was like ball, strike, and I watched. I also have a different level of self-control because I grew up around it. I agree with you. I think this entire argument is disingenuous from everybody because, to be clear, we have sponsorships here. To be clear, we have partnerships with this company. Every single television network throws the ads up all day. Every single sport is in some way affiliated with it. So when people just say, oh my God, how can we let this happen? Well, okay, it's all or nothing for me. This to me, it's not that much different than, remember a few years ago when it was an NFL player can't even go in to a casino to promote a fantasy football event. And now you have a team in Vegas, my hometown, right? Like, so you have a team at Allegiant that stadium has specific entrances for different levels of VIPs of different casinos, right? So I guess I look at all of this and I say, okay, to your point, Godfrey, why are we surprised? But also, every time they catch somebody doing it, I say the system's working. All right, so, okay, Sorsby has an addiction issue with gambling. Go get it fixed. That's fine. But every time we catch somebody doing this, I say, great. That means the guardrails that are in place are actually working. You don't get away with it. You eventually get caught.
Yeah, but the problem here is that we're prescribing the exact same process that we did for drug abuse in the 1970s and 80s. If this guy loses his career because he's developed a gambling addiction because of exposure to something that we legalized, who's at fault there? I have no problem with legalized gambling. I have no problem with legalized sports books. I've been on, I think, 6 different podcasts that have been sponsored by books. I don't get, like, it doesn't bother me. I have empathy for you in the sense of like being from Las Vegas, where an overwhelming majority of American culture wants to wag their finger at the concept of Las Vegas, and then an overwhelming majority of American culture visits Las Vegas. So, that's a very puritanical American sort of mindset, is to sort of wag your finger. In the South, we call it Baptist beer, right? It's like all the people who are talking about the sins of drinking, they just put the 6-pack in the back of the fridge so you don't see it. Therefore, right, they're not participating. So, no, my only issue here is that I foresee a situation. Let's jump forward to Labor Day weekend, and ESPN's College Game Day is going to be talking about the big games that are going to start the college football season. And they're going to be talking about Texas Tech as a playoff contender because they were in the playoff last year. Also, Brendan Sorsby was one of the most expensive investments in NIL in the transfer portal this year. So you kind of have to talk about him if he's not going to be playing for Texas Tech on week 1. And what I fear and what I predict is a moral castigation of Brendan Sorsby and not the system. That ESPN and the large media outlets, and I'm not including myself in this because I'm here at Yahoo and I'm not going to do this, but I think the overwhelming majority of our colleagues are going to wag their finger at him the same way they would at someone who gets pulled over for driving 95 miles an hour in a residential street or beats up their girlfriend. And this to me is ridiculous because we have exposed an entire generation of people to this with really very little in the way of coping mechanisms. We're essentially experimenting on this generation of people by letting them gamble in an app all the time. So this is going to happen. We need to have treatment options. We don't need to ruin this kid's life. And I firmly believe, based on the evidence here, that he was not engaged in defrauding the integrity of the sport. This kid had a gambling addiction, the same way that someone who pumps like thousands of dollars into one of those like online apps, like for a game, just to buy like in-game currency. It's basically the same psychological build, the way the app developers and casinos work with the online app. So I don't really have a problem with anything that's happened, Fitz, to your point. I just have a problem if we're going to demonize this kid for doing this. And I don't think his career should be taken away from him. I think he should get treatment.
I think it's a fair point, because if we see a college football player pulled over for a DUI, alcohol, a vice, just like gambling, a DUI, a bad decision involving said vice, we don't automatically kick that kid off a team. What do? Send that kid to rehab, provide that kid counseling. I think there's a certain level of grace that should be afforded to every player, especially every young person, at 20, 21, 22 years old. But there is also a certain extent, there's also a certain point where there's only so much grace to extend. I don't think we're there with Brendan Sorsby, but I do think that a certain level of grace is fair and human. But Godfrey, I've seen a lot of parallels. Obviously, gambling associated with money, it's easy to make that connection with NIL. Is that just convenient in your opinion, or is there a legitimate tie there between young college-age athletes gambling and NIL?
Are you asking like the availability of having the funds from NIL is somehow encouraging the gambling?
I don't believe that personally. I think that's just a convenient way to wag your finger at the changes in college sports.
Yeah.
But I think that is the tie that is being made, at least that I've seen on social media.
Yeah, the best answer I can give you.
It's easier to gamble if you're rich. It is easier to gamble if you have money to gamble with. But yes.
Absolutely. But I've also been to casinos like Fitz has in Tunica, Mississippi, and I've been watching people gamble who there's a reason why they run lunch specials on the 1st and the 15th at a casino. It's not predicated on wealth. My answer is this. 2 years ago, I was told that NIL was going to result in a boom market for luxury vehicle sales, and that it was all of this like racially coded, ridiculous, derogatory stuff. Like, just wait with NILs, you're gonna have a bunch of rap labels start. You're gonna have a bunch of people buying luxury vehicles. You're gonna have a bunch of stupid expenses. These kids don't know what they're doing. Do you know what the overwhelming majority of NIL money I've seen go to? Paying off mom's house, putting sister through college, buying investment property. In other words, all the stuff that we would have done if we would have been handed that money at that age of our lives, right? Or most people would have. So there's this idea, I think, Caroline, to your point, people want to demonize the concept of 22-year-olds in college or 20-year-olds or 19-year-olds in college receiving $5 million for their services because they want it to still be an amateur sport. And that's that morality police that I'm talking about here. I don't think there's any connection necessarily. yeah, I've seen some people spin NIL in stupid ways, but the overwhelming majority of people that I see receive NIL in college sports, when I talk to them, they're doing the same basic stuff that like a 35-year-old CPA or somebody who's trying to bulk up a 401k would do, because they realize, again, the overwhelming majority of kids receiving NIL, they're not going to play in the NFL. This is it. They're not going to see a massive Nike endorsement for $100 million. They're probably not going to be a name outside of their little college community by the time that they're 28. So there was a real weird moral thing a couple years ago about NIL, about how these kids were going to ruin their lives. And the early returning evidence is that most of them are just like paying off parents' mortgages. God forbid.
We've allowed child actors and child musicians to get rich for a very long time.
Yes.
I just want to point out, this is not the first, like, nobody ever turned around and was like, wait. I watched Seth Greenberg. I love Coach, but I watched Seth Greenberg talking the other day about how we need to have mental health programs for all these kids that are making millions of dollars in college sports, and then they get a regular job. They're going to need to adjust to society. And my first thought was, has any of them ever worried about whether the non-working members of the band Perry can handle the fact that they no longer make, like, I'm just saying, at the end of the day, it's amazing how weird this dynamic is. Hypothetically, I did not make millions, but yes, hypothetically, yes.
Fitz, you and I, from where I sit right now in West Nashville, you and I could probably name 20 or so individuals in country music who are older than college football age who have not necessarily utilized their funds correctly. Okay? We'll leave it at that, right?
And nobody ever turned around and said, you know what we need to do? Throttle back a singer's opportunity to earn money. I'm just saying. We can talk about this all day. Check out College Football Inquirer. Godfrey, always appreciate your time. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We need to like, I know you got Inquirer to do it. We'll just do a 6-hour daily one day. Check out College Football Inquirer. It'll be a smart, nuanced conversation. Follow him on Twitter, X, @38Godfrey. Godfrey, always appreciate your time, my friend.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Godfrey.
All right, plenty more to come, including a Rookie of the Year that was closer than it's been in a long time. Second closest ever. We'll tell you about it.
Does Orlando win it in overtime, or does this instant classic continue? Deep drop and throw, end zone, Thomas Owens. That's an Orlando overtime winner. That is the most decorated receiver in the history of the franchise. Of course, he's the one to end it.
He's like 6'5", 230, like insane athlete, really, really good arm. And I don't know if he'll ever be the fourth best quarterback in the league, where he's like Josh Allen, kind of like always in, MVP conversations, but he can be in the Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott tier, where he's like kind of always quarterback 7-ish, and like can have those years and moments where he's playing like an all-pro. Like that to me is the best outcome.
What put you over the top to like, I want to go to Indiana?
I was really close to going to a couple other schools. However, the point that really cemented me into Indiana is Coach Ignetti really focusing on development. His big selling point was, hey, I don't know, like other schools are trying to sell you on if we're going to win a national championship, if we're going to win all these games. I just know one thing I can do is develop quarterbacks.
It's all about alignment and assignment, whether you're playing junior high football or IFL football. Myler fakes the give, goes the other way with it. He launches himself into the end zone, and he's going to get the touchdown.
That's just a dynamic effort. That is a will to want to get it in the end zone there, because he knew that he was running out of space.
Yes.
And so he thought, there's only one way you can go here, and that's up and over.
Cooper Flagg wins the 2025-26 NBA Rookie of the Year in one of the closest decisions we've ever seen. Second closest voting margin in the last 20 years. And look, did the voters get it right, Caroline? Cooper, Rookie of the Year. You like this?
Look, they didn't get it wrong, they did not get it wrong, because when you look at Cooper Flagg's stats, he was averaging more points per game than Kon Knueppel, more rebounds per game than Kon Knueppel, more assists per game than Kon Knueppel, more steals per game than Kon Knueppel. If you just want to break down the numbers, like, yes, 100% in terms of numbers, in terms of impact for his team, in terms of cultural and media impact and attention, Cooper Flagg very much so is a very deserving Rookie of the Year. It's just not who would have gotten my vote if I did have a vote for NBA Rookie of the Year. I would have voted for Kon Knueppel. Important to point out, I have a very clear and obvious bias. I live in Charlotte. I live 8 minutes down the street from the Spectrum Center. Like, I can feel the impact that Kon Knueppel has made for that organization, for that team, and for the city of Charlotte. So I will very much so acknowledge that. I see the statistics. But I also think that Kon Knueppel had been a more consistent player throughout the entirety of the season. I think it's easy to look at Cooper Flagg's surge toward the end of the season, a 50-point game followed up by a 45-point game in the beginning of April. That's in the forefront of a lot of people, a lot of voters' minds. Whereas we saw Kon Knueppel really struggle in the play-in game against the Orlando Magic. This is an award that's voted on by people, and recency bias is just a clear and obvious human and person thing that is, I think fair to be taken into account here. But I feel as if Kon Knueppel is almost being penalized for being on a team that has more support around him, that he has the advantage of being able to share the wealth. There are other players on that Charlotte team that can create offense, that can move the ball around, that can play defense, so on and so forth. But I just think Kon Knueppel's impact, he's explosive from three. He's rewritten the history books, not just in the Charlotte Hornets organization, but in the NBA, and 3 points made from a rookie in the NBA. And I thought that he was more consistent from the beginning of the season until the end than Cooper Flagg was. But that is not to say that Cooper Flagg is an undeserving Rookie of the Year. As long as the Rookie of the Year was either Cooper Flagg or Kon Knueppel, the voters would have gotten it right.
Yeah, so there are two things that I have a problem with in this whole discussion. And the first is this graphic that's up right now, because this is all over Twitter X. The race was 50-50 in which Kon had a bad game in the play and got benched. Did that game change the outcome of the award? Okay, that's an analytic. That analytic did not sit down and talk to every voter. If we were polling voters every day and it was 50-50 and then all of a sudden it changed after the play-in, we'd have a real consideration here. A numbers cruncher, a database, sat there and said, here's the way it should play out. Here's the way it should play out. Here's like the fact that the database factored in those extra games doesn't mean that people did. So to me, to give any credence at all to this graphic is absolutely asinine, because at the end of the day, unless we are surveying every single voter every single week to figure out where we stand on these things, which might not be the worst idea, then we can't know. And this makes the presumption of how the vote's going to go all the way through. The other thing that drives me crazy is somebody voted for Kon Knueppel as third place. And look, doesn't make a huge difference here, but I want to know whoever has Kon Knueppel in at third place and VJ Edgecombe in at second place. I'd like to talk to that person and get a real understanding of why. Again, that wouldn't have made such a drastic difference that it changes the outcome here. But congratulations, Philadelphia writer, that gave VJ Edgecombe that second place vote. I have a hard time getting around that. Other than that, there's no wrong outcome here. And I think still the biggest story of this is that we might be seeing this sort of oh my God moment where two guys that are teammates that are also, because of that, close friends that also appear to be rivals. Like, this is a sort of Disney thing that you get for the next 10 years. Inject Kon Knueppel versus Cooper Flagg into the NBA for the next decade, and I will take every ounce of that energy. That is the best part of it. And of course, Caroline, I watched this award announcement, and I kept thinking in the moment, how in the hell did Duke not win a national championship? Like, we've given Shire a lot of credit for what he's done, but you just had the two, like, look, the two guys, clearly the two guys you didn't win a natty out of that. That to me is stunning.
This is like Duke 2024 2024-25 years are hard. Duke 24-25 is like the equivalent of LSU 2019 and the level of success that those superstars have had at the next level. And Duke fell short in the Final Four. That is a very, very fair point that you make. This is a great thing for the NBA. I think rivalries like this, even if it doesn't exist between the two of them, former roommates, former teammates in college, it exists at least in our eyes and how close the Rookie of the Year voting was. The fact that whenever the Hornets and the Mavs played in the regular season, it was must-see TV because it was Kon versus Cooper. So even if we're creating the media, the fans are creating a rivalry that doesn't exist between the two of them, it's still good for the NBA because you have two young superstars that will forever, until the end of their careers and even beyond, will forever be tied to and compared to one another. That's a great thing for the sport. And perhaps one of the most massive indictments on John Shire, far more than choking away not just one lead in March Madness, but two.
And again, I will just continue to die on the hill that, Franklin, I love this. Doug points out, I hope Kon takes this personally. Entirely believable slight. Now, Doug Branson, our producer extraordinaire, also does great work with Locked On Hornets. I feel this, and I hope Kon takes it personally also. The next time a college basketball analyst sits on TV and tells you that the problem with college basketball is that you have kids competing against men, just look at Kon Knueppel and Cooper Flagg, two gentlemen that are not old enough to celebrate their first and second place finishes respectfully by going out to a bar and having a drink together. They are not yet 21, so legally they aren't out in a bar celebrating it, and they went out and they did this to grown-ass men all year. So the next time somebody tells you that you can't compete because age is a safety concern, let's remember that those two gentlemen just did that against guys that are like 41-year-old LeBron.
To that point, Fitzy, one reason for voting for Cooper Flagg, or, if fans, people on social media, whatever, thought that Cooper Flagg should have been the Rookie of the Year, one reason that I saw cited repeatedly was, well, Cooper Flagg is 19 years old. Cooper Flagg's doing this at 19. Cooper Flagg. And I'm like, look, that is wildly impressive. Yes, you're 19 years old. You are, you were at your high school prom like 1 year ago. Yes, that is crazy. And yes, that's wildly impressive. Kon Knueppel's 20. So, it's not like Kon Knueppel is a 28-year-old freshman doing this at his physical peak. No, they're both incredibly young. So miss me with the age thing. I do think, and I will forever believe, that Cooper Flagg in part won Rookie of the Year because it was a confirmation bias. Because everyone knows the name Cooper Flagg. Everyone expected Cooper Flagg to be a superstar. Everyone expects Cooper Flagg to be a superstar for the entirety of his career. I do think the Duke hype, the #1 overall pick, the quote-unquote savior of the Dallas Mavericks organization moniker, played just a little bit of a part into this award.
Well, congratulations then, Hornets fans, because Kon's going to have a chip on his shoulder for the rest of his career. All right. We've got plenty more to get into in the NBA with the playoffs, but coming up next, we're going to react to real things that were actually said during draft weekend.
Another matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. How are these teams going to guard each other?
If you're Denver, you're going to have to find a comfort throwing different coverages at Minnesota and Anthony Edwards. It can't just be one thing. The same goes for Nikola Jokic, where honestly, whatever you do, I'm eventually going to get to a point where you do not feel comfortable with how you are guarding me, no matter who's on me.
Handoff, Thomas busting it through for the end zone. Touchdown! Tavion Thomas and Tucson back in front with 16 seconds left. 1 second, final play of the game. Jerome Johnson looking to the end zone. Johnson, far corner, jump ball, knocked into the crowd. Game over. Tucson wins.
Playing basketball with your back to the basket and not able to see the floor in the same way was a whole lot different for LeBron. And so that's why it took a little bit for him to feel comfortable in that back to the basket positioning. He's got more post-ups this postseason than Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns and Alperen Şengün combined. This is a huge story, and what a wrinkle that LeBron James has thrown into this series.
When you guys talk about your relationship and your friendship and your respect, there are some people who think like, well, do they want to kill each other? Do they want to fight each other? Do they want to hurt each other? You have to do that when you fight someone.
Yeah. If you have like females sparring in the gym, like it's really hard to not to go heavy. Like women just like, they cut that, emotional thing off, and they just like, it's me or you. And Rhonda has that, I have that.
Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. We got some breaking Major League Baseball news out here. Yet another manager change. Just when I've come in and say we don't see firings this early, we get another one. Cora fired by the Boston Red Sox over the weekend. Now, the Phillies have fired manager Rob Thompson. I'm going full Matchbox 20. Sources told The Athletic Don Mattingly will be the interim manager. So Don Mattingly, who was obviously with the Blue Jays, now with the Phillies, becomes the interim manager. The Phillies have had a rough go of it, Caroline. A big change here for them.
Yeah, a massive change, but also a change that I don't think should come as a massive surprise. Although seeing 2 firings happen in mid to late April, especially firings with the Boston Red Sox and the Philadelphia Phillies, and we're talking about 2 of the most historic and successful franchises, 2 of the biggest brands in Major League Baseball, both having vacancies this early in the season. Now that feels awfully stunning, but the Phillies have fallen way, way, way short of expectation. I mean, they are 9-19 at this point in the season, and they're 4 games back of the Washington Nationals, just in 3rd place in the National League East. And we're talking about a Phillies squad that, I mean, just a couple of years ago, we were talking about having a World Series ceiling. And now we're looking at a Phillies team that has only won 1 game in their last, 10 plus games. I can understand the Philadelphia Phillies front office looking around and thinking something has got to change. We just cannot continue down this trend of losing baseball games. We cannot continue down this trend of digging ourselves in such a deep hole in the division that you can't get out of it. So even though it might feel a little bit early, better to get out early and figure out some sort of resolution to dig yourself out of this and make something of this season. Better to at least excite the fan base and to give the fan base something to look forward to on April 28th than August or September when the season is already lost. But it is stunning to think that there is a vacancy in both Philadelphia and Boston.
I agree, but also, is it not a little bit stuck? Look, I'm not trying to rub salt in the wounds of anybody here, but you just mentioned everything about the Phillies. They're 9-19. Right? They're 10.5 games back in their division. They're 1-9 in their last 10. 9-19, 10.5 games back, 2-8 in their last 10 would be me describing the Mets. So we've seen changes. Like if you'd asked us a week ago what change we thought would be coming, would any of us have believed that the Red Sox and the Phillies would make change before the Mets? Because when you say haven't met up to expectations, my God, I just sit there and immediately think Mets. So yeah. I'm not sure. We'll see. We've got 2 massive openings in Major League Baseball. And also it'll be interesting to see for somebody like Alex Cora that's such a hot commodity. Like, does Alex Cora just suddenly look around now and become a commodity to other teams that are making change? I can't imagine that. Don Mattingly, the interim.
I could, though, see Alex Cora being one of the hottest managers on the market because there are a lot of people within the Boston Red Sox organization that was like, okay, you're addressing the wrong problem. There are much larger issues within the Boston Red Sox organization in the front office, leaning far too much on analytics to build a roster, way more than Alex Cora was the issue. So I would not be surprised if maybe if we do see Carlos Mendoza eventually fired, which if there is a next manager to get fired, I probably would put my money on Carlos Mendoza in New York. Wouldn't be surprised to see some tires kicked on Alex Cora.
I love the concept of Alex Cora getting fired by the Red Sox and then taking another job in season and suddenly leading to them to some meteoric run. That it just feels like, I'm sorry, Red Sox fans, it just feels like that's too good of a movie to pass up. So obviously we'll keep you updated on any updates that we get, but breaking news, the Phillies have parted ways with their manager. Don Mattingly will step in as the interim. We did get some interesting moments over the course of the weekend. The draft as it just sort of settles down for all of us. We got some crazy quotes. For example, Panthers first round tackle Monroe Freeling on what he likes to do outside of football. I love this. He said, sometimes I like to donate golf balls to the water at local golf courses. I love this. I think that's the most human thing because anybody that's ever tried to hit a golf ball knows how that feels. I feel that. Are you in and out on the Panthers' new tackle and his struggling golf game?
Oh, I love this. I do think sometimes we just take ourselves way too seriously. So I do love when a guy can be self-deprecating in a sweet and innocent way and to show off your personality. You know, we need more of that, especially from offensive linemen. They don't get the publicity or the love maybe that they deserve. So we need more of guys showing off their personality a little bit. I love this from Monroe Freeling. And I am not surprised at all that a guy named Monroe Freeling from Georgia enjoys the game of golf. That all just kind of makes sense to me.
That is all right. So how about this one? Spencer Fano, who, by the way, if you watched us on this show, I mocked him at number 6 to Cleveland. Cleveland's able to trade down and still pick up the guy that I think was the best pick for them. So absolutely great work. But when he was asked about it, he asked about Cleveland. He said, well, you know, at least there's not a lot of traffic. I don't know what else he said, but he said, as far as Cleveland's minimal traffic, but do we like first relationships in the building, blah, 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 blah. Do we like the draft pick focusing on minimal traffic being a selling point for his new team?
So about a year ago, I moved from one city with truly horrific, horrendous traffic to another city whose traffic is not nearly as bad. I get it. I 100% get it. It's an important thing. It's a fun little reminder too that players are people too. Like players drive their cars, players experience traffic. Stars, they're just like us. So yeah, I'm in on this. Enjoy not having bad traffic. Also, do we know that Cleveland has minimal traffic, or is he just making that assumption? I don't know that about Cleveland
several times, but I haven't really driven around Cleveland much. But you're right. Like nothing makes you an old person faster than being in a city with terrible traffic, where you sit there and you're like, well, got to leave now because we got to get home before rush hour hits. And that's real. That is real. Michael Farb, our producer, knows Cleveland better than anyone. He has confirmed no traffic. So there we go.
Great. I love that for him then.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. Let's get one more in. And this Ravens linebacker, Zion Young, told us he's so committed to winning, he's even willing to be the kicker. After watching what McAfee has experimented with on game day, how do we feel, in or out, on Young and his commitment to winning by kicking if necessary?
I am out on that because kickers are people too. And implying that kicking is something that's bottom of the barrel and something that he would have to do just to help the football team is not very nice to your kicker. Your kicker is one of the most important people on your football team. Just to ask the Baltimore Ravens how they feel about having a reliable kicker. So Zion Young, I don't appreciate that. We need to give some love to our special teams friends too.
One of my dear friends, he's like a brother to me. I love him, Mike Golick Jr. He is a friend of this show. We talk all the time. I love that man. He was convinced that he could hit a field goal and it would be no big deal. So he went to Chicago for this event, and it went all over social media as Gojo attempted a kick, and it looked, I'm going to be honest, Mike, it didn't look any better than if I had attempted the kick, right? And so then he comes back afterwards, and he's like, the weather was cold. I didn't get a great warm-up. And it's like, what, do you think kickers don't kick in cold weather? You're right. Kickers are people too, and we need to give it more respect. You got to be bendy. You got to be stretchy. You got to have that one leg that can right up on, you got to have that ability. There's a lot to it, you know. You got to have the right stance when you take the steps over and the wiggle before you kick. There's a lot that goes into kicking. I think it's blatant disrespect, but I also love Zion Young. By the way, don't give any NFL team an idea. If they could figure out how to save a roster position by having a lineman kick, that would be the ultimate cheat code. If you no longer needed to have a kicker on your roster because your lineman can handle it, that is the level of we didn't know we needed.
A lot of cheap owners out there that would love to just have a 2-1 and save a couple mil against the cap without having to sign a kicker. Don't tell Mike Brown.
Just imagine that too. Yeah, you have a great kicking day, but a terrible day on the line. How are fans going to view you? I don't know. What I know is that we'll be back tomorrow right here at 9 a.m. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. Thanks for watching. Come back and watch Yahoo Sports Daily tomorrow. Have a great day.